Good afternoon in the East. Good morning to those joining from California. And welcome to Fake Videos and Election Cybersecurity in the Age of AI. I'm Adam Powell, Executive Director of the USC Election Cybersecurity Initiative, a multidisciplinary project created 6 years ago by USC schools of communication, engineering, public policy, and business, and more have joined since then. More USC schools have joined since then. In 2020, we were the only entity of any kind, including the federal government, that provided election cybersecurity training for election officials and campaign workers in each and every one of the 50 states. Homeland Security told us the federal government only did 48 and thanked us for training election directors in the other two. In 2024, adversaries are still attacking, but the methods and tools are changing. So we must change to defend elections here and in democracies around the world. USC conducts workshops and conferences now on 4 continents with university partners and government agencies in each country where we hold programs. And in December, we will expand to Australia. So we'll be on 5 continents. So unless they have elections in Antarctica, I think we're pretty well covered. We'll begin first with a welcome from Vint, who was the person who actually urged us back in 2015 to start this project. He's now flying to Europe, so he recorded his greeting, and we'll hear from Vint now.
Hello, my name is Vint Cerf. I'm Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google. And I'd like to thank my good friend Adam Clayton Powell III for giving me yet another opportunity to be excited about the work you're doing, specifically with regard to election safety, security, and integrity. This year, 2024, many countries around the world are holding national elections. And the results of these elections, of course, may loom large with regard to the future of our political and economic environment all around the globe. This is certainly true here in the United States, where elections are coming in less than 2 months, a very significant election in the history of the country, given the past several years of our environment here, and given the candidates that are specifically in play. But I want to come back to your work, which suggests a very important focus, not only on practices and methods to assure that the voters who are qualified to vote get to vote, and those who are not qualified to vote don't. And importantly, that all of the electoral results, especially if they happen to end up in some digital form, arrive at the proper destination with the suitable integrity and authenticity, so that when the count is made, we can have confidence that the vote will be accurately recorded and the consequences correctly rendered. So your work, as you think your way through what could possibly go wrong and what can we do about it, and how do we make these sorts of things more efficient and perhaps less lengthy. In some cases, elections have stretched out for long periods of time because of disputes over the validity of the vote. And anything we can do in the digital world that increases confidence in that vote is vitally important. So I invite you to focus on those questions and hopefully come up with some good advice for the rest of the world to follow. Meanwhile, thanks very much for all of your time and for this little bit of time listening to me rant on this topic. If we don't meet face-to-face, perhaps we'll cross paths on the net.
Campaign leaders on the front lines of cybersecurity defense from Texas, New Mexico, and here in Washington, D.C. But we begin by going to Los Angeles for context from Luca, research scientist at USC's Information Sciences Institute, who works in USC's 2024 Election Integrity Initiative, which tracks adversaries and misinformation in real time. So Luca, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. I hope you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for the introduction, Adam. I'm Luca. I'm a research assistant professor at USC and also lead science at the Information Science Institute. And today I'm going to give you an overview of the use of malicious applications of generative AI in the context of election interference. I'll explore how these technologies can potentially disrupt the democratic processes and even the integrity of the election. I'll start by giving you an overview of what we do at ISI with AI, and in particular in the AI division, where we leverage AI for three main thrusts. The first is to leverage AI to build super teams, not only composed by humans, but also AI agents, and understand how to combine these three components to solve the problems of tomorrow. The second is leverage AI to be prepared, not only in case of emergencies or crises, but also in case of technology, and trying to understand the downstream effects or unexpected consequences of technologies like AI itself. And finally, AI to bolster democracy, which is what I'm going to talk about today. And this paper in particular, I think nicely captures our idea of bolstering democracy when facing the risk of election interference. The authors of this paper claim that the most dangerous threat for democracy is when adversaries are able to undermine the common knowledge of the electoral process, turning it into contested knowledge through actions like hacking or misinformation campaigns with, for instance, fake news that imply that an electoral process has been compromised. And that's why influence campaigns, and in particular information operation on social media that attack common knowledge, are dangerous for democracies. And our work here at ISI aims at bolstering democracy by detecting attacks on common knowledge and ideally trying to mitigate them. And our election integrity initiative that Adam just mentioned is our latest effort in which we aim exactly to discover and potentially mitigate online election interference. And with online election interference, we refer to the manipulation of digital information to influence the outcome of the elections. And this can include activities such as spreading misinformation, fake news, or orchestrating social media campaigns to sway public opinion. And the introduction of generative AI in this arena has magnified these threats by enabling more sophisticated and scalable forms of interference. Generative AI presents new opportunities for malicious actors to deceive and manipulate public opinion, in particular with its ability to create realistic text, images, and videos. And I'm going to give you an overview of some potential application of generative AI in election interference, starting from one of the most concerning applications of generative AI, which is the creation of deepfake and other forms of synthetic media. And fabricated content can be used to spread false information, ruin reputations, and sway public opinion. Deepfake technology can, for instance, generate realistic videos of political figures saying or doing things they never did. And as we can imagine, the impact of deepfakes can be huge. Imagine a deepfake video of a political figure or a candidate saying something unethical or inflammatory, and that video can go viral on social media, altering public perception and even shifting the outcome of an election. But deepfakes aren't the only threat in the information ecosystem, and AI-powered botnets are another dangerous example or tool for election interference. And these are basically networks of automated accounts, bots, that post, like, share, reshare, and comment on social media, making this seem like there is a widespread agreement on certain viewpoints. And these bots can be programmed to spread misinformation or amplify propaganda. Modern artificial intelligence makes these bots look and act like humans, making them hard to spot and even harder to take down. Just think back to the 2016 election, when bots were extensively used to influence discussion and spread false information. The scary thing is that bots back then were way less sophisticated than they are today, as they just reposted content at scale. Nowadays, bots can generate new content or original content by means of large language models, and they can do that at scale. And indeed, another way generative AI can be weaponized is by means of targeted misinformation campaigns. And this is mainly due to the ability of generative AI to generate realistic, persuasive text, which in turn enables the creation of misinformation campaigns that are highly targeted. For instance, these campaigns can exploit societal biases, tailoring messages to specific groups to maximize a given impact. And by pulling data from social media networks or other online sources, malicious actors can create personalized propaganda that resonates deeply with their targets. And finally, there's the issue of synthetic identities and fake accounts, including mock websites. Generative AI can be used to create highly convincing fake personas, complete with photos, bios, and even detailed posting histories on social media. And these fake accounts are used to infiltrate online communities, spread certain narratives, or coordinate attack on political figures. And the line between real and fake becomes blurry, making it very difficult for an average user to tell what's genuine and what's manufactured. So altogether, these malicious application of generative AI, here summarized in this table, can play a significant role in influence campaigns and information operation on social media. But how does it work? How these elements are combined? Well, the illustration in this slide mirrors the life cycle of an influence campaign. So first of all, the initiators of an information operation create inauthentic personas who generate and share content on social media platforms. And these drivers, the drivers of these campaigns can be of different nature, ranging from fully automated accounts like bots to human operators like state-sponsored trolls, and of course, their combination. And these inauthentic personas form a network that generate content, often using technologies like generative AI, LLMs, and so on and so forth, and tactics that try to create an illusion of public consensus, also trying to manipulate platforms' feed, making content more viral and popular than it is. Now, the main problem of these campaigns is that organic legitimate users can sometimes trust, endorse, and reshare the content generated by these inauthentic accounts, further amplifying these pieces of content, which can eventually be picked up by media outlets and therefore resonate to a larger extent. So AI plays a role in many of these steps, from the creation of fake accounts and their coordination to the artificial amplification and generation of inauthentic content used to persuade and target organic audiences. And in the anticipation of the 2024 election, we just released a study that aims at uncovering coordinated information operation on Twitter, now X. And using our own AI framework for detecting online coordination, we uncovered an orchestrated effort to disseminate misleading, biased, and AI-generated content through a cross-platform information operation. This network here represented in this slide originates on X, where accounts coordinate to amplify links to external websites, mainly mock websites or mock mock news providers, which in turn points to a YouTube channel. So the network spans X, YouTube, and the broad web, disseminating political content through different channels and websites. And this is an example of what these accounts systematically share. And this is an example in particular or external website. These sites hosted identical content. They're basically clones, and hosted articles promoting sensationalist, inflammatory, or biased narratives. Some of these accounts shared AI-generated images. Here are a few examples of images representing strong emotionally charged depictions of Biden and Trump. One important information is that this study is based on data collection when Biden was still the Democratic candidate. So we can see that one is portrayed mockingly with insinuation of weakness, as implied by the pill symbol. The other is depicted as powerful and dominant with symbolic imagery to emphasize these traits. Another signal of coordination or inauthentic activity are, for example, posting the same image independently rather than as a part of a single retweet cascade. The image on the top of this slide represents a conservative narrative showing an alleged support of the Black community to the Republican presidential candidate. And many accounts, another signal is on the bottom, where many accounts share the same phrase in their biography, in the description of their Twitter profile, which says, "Are you tired of fake news? Click on the link below." These links in the bios direct users to domains hosting mock news sites. And most of the times, these sites are clones sharing identical content. And in turn, they link to a YouTube channel, to the very same YouTube channel. This coordinated network promoted this YouTube channel called Media Opinion through several websites and Twitter accounts. And although some of these websites and Twitter accounts have been taken down, this YouTube channel is still active and is still active on YouTube with over 30,000 engagements and interaction received so far. So overall, these preliminary findings surface the evidence of a multi-platform information operation spanning X, Twitter, YouTube, and the entire web in the run-up to the election. So concluding this presentation, what is still missing and what we can do in the next few months or in the next years to preserve election integrity? Well, first of all, it's important to design tools for the detection of generated AI content. Current tools are neither super accurate when they are tested in the wild, nor free, therefore hindering research. Research is also needed to study and analyze user susceptibility to generated AI content to understand if social media users are capable of identifying generated AI content and or susceptible to this kind of content. We have seen how coordinated efforts span across multiple networks. Current research often looks at this information operation on a single platform. And therefore, we need models based on AI or network science that automatically detect these malicious pathways across the web. So the study that I presented today showed the first approach of this kind, but we need more research in this domain. And finally, I also mentioned how some accounts or websites have been suspended or taken down. Overall, this highlights the need for cross-platform moderation strategies that consider the interconnected nature of the digital information ecosystem. The removal of content or suspension of users of one platform may not be sufficient in addressing the spread of harmful content across platforms. So cooperation among social media platforms is therefore desirable, but also practically valuable. Knowing what content has been deemed inappropriate on another platform can inform moderation strategies on another platform. And that's it. Thank you for your time. I'll be happy to take any question from the audience. Here are the links to our recent paper on the 2024 election with the preliminary findings that I just described, and also a link to our election integrity initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca, and all of you who are here in person. You have speaker bios, and for those who are online, we're putting the bios, the links to the bios in the chat. So thanks again, Luca. Please feel free to join us, and we'll continue now as we move from the context to people on the front line. So we'll turn things over to Scott Bates, who worked with us in our Connecticut workshops in 2020, and since then. And now Scott is USC Annenberg inaugural Election Cybersecurity Fellow. So Scott, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks very much, Adam and Luca. That was a fantastic presentation. I appreciate that. I think election practitioners and officials should use this as a great resource. To illustrate what this really means, the use of generative AI out there, in a time of crisis, I would suggest. The night that former President Trump had the assassination attempt, we all remember that. My wife and I were out in the evening, and we came home and didn't know what had happened. Well, my son was there. We turn on CNN, we turn in our trusted source and so forth. But then after that, I was seeing images online and we're trying to figure out what actually happened. And my son was sharing some of these with me. They were not reality. They were fakes. And I didn't quite know what to believe, to be honest with you, because it's breaking news now. And the net is ahead of the networks, and the networks are pulling it off the net. And I found out that those images that I saw had come originally from some websites based in the PRC. So who knows why, and who knows, it's for clicks, it could be for nefarious purposes, who knows. But to illustrate the point, that moment was, political violence in the US, disturbing evening, and not to know exactly what you could believe really was unsettling, at least to me and my family. This space has changed with light speed. In 2017, I was Deputy Secretary of State in Connecticut, and the first day on the job, we had a call with Jay Johnson, who said to all the secretaries of state and the deputies, "You are now critical infrastructure." We've all had to ramp up our capabilities as election officials and even practitioners. And now 2024 is really the first US election cycle in which we are seeing the wide influence of AI in the election process. So this is all relatively new. If you look at, I think the AP poll a little bit ago said 2/3 of the American people don't see AI as producing reliable or factual data. So that's where the public is. They're skeptical. So already you can see this, people are not immediately trusting the information that they're getting. So the tech companies responded to a degree. There was a meeting in Munich between OpenAI and Apple and Meta and Google and X, and they pledged to protect elections in the 2024 cycle because these platforms obviously are global, and we know this is the year of elections in 2024. They said that they would try to help audiences track the origin of AI, and they wanted to deploy, in, I think, lawyer language, reasonable precautions against the use of generative AI for nefarious purposes. But since then, it's been a bit spotty in application and practical effect, at least in my opinion. And we see that the threats are real. The Department of Justice has put sanctions on RT for good reason, a $10 million fine on a Tennessee social media company, which was passing along information from RT that was not factual, undermining the position of Ukraine and other things. You have tech firms are not united in what they should do about the use of digital markers in generative AI or the use of disclaimers. They're not united on the idea of even banning information that is false about the process of voting and counting. So these are, matters that are probably going to have to be legislated on. The challenge with that is that, with the exception of some of the people we have here today, not all legislators and their staffs are just getting up to speed on this. And they can't be expected to be experts in all of this. So why should we care about this topic, which is seemingly obscure, but I would suggest is a fundamental potential threat in the toolbox of those who try to undermine our democracy? The confidence in election systems, if you don't have that, it undermines confidence in democracy writ large. Everybody knows that, but it bears repeating because it is so fundamental and so important. There's the ability with generative AI to promote discord and even civil unrest, and we've seen incidents where that tactic has been used. And then an effect I think that happens is the polarization politically that we have in the US only gets deepened, worsened, pick your adjective. It makes it very, very difficult indeed. So to consider some of these questions, we've really assembled a really interesting team of people here today to consider how the emergence of AI and its current and potential impacts on the US election process, which we have about 50 days left. We have a state election official who has national experience in Maggie Toulouse-Oliver, who will be visiting us with us soon. We have a local official on the front lines in Tarrant County, Texas, who will be joining us. André Mendes will be with us soon. And then to my left, we have Jude Meche. And Jude he has a long bio, which I encourage you all to look at. But currently, he's with the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. He's been doing a role there for about 15 years. I'll read a bit of it. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at DSCC, where he oversees all information technology and security functions. He's responsible for managing and deploying secure IT solutions. He also was the technology site lead for President Obama when he actually accepted the Democratic nomination. Talk about pressure, but it all went well. So this is a fascinating person, not to put you on the spot, Jude, but fascinating because we think about, or at least I do as a former election official, the integrity of election systems. We have to remember campaigns are part of the election system, part and parcel. And we know that they are vulnerable to attack. We've seen that in conventional attacks. But fascinating to hear, Jude, your thoughts on the use of AI and what we have to watch out for, and how the state of play, what we have to watch out for, and any potential fixes that might be out there. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to USC and Adam and for everyone joining today. Yeah, it's sort of a brave new world, right? Where what candidates and campaigns were doing to get elected, we should live in what I'll call a prior to 2016 world and sort of the current one. Prior to 2016, this is not something that campaigns worried about. They didn't worry about, but to a large extent, cybersecurity, yes, but not where it is now. And certainly they didn't worry about, mis and disinformation and, inauthentic accounts creating this sort of mis and disinformation. So that's a whole new sort of spectrum of things that they are both not experts at, but it can derail their campaigns. So, we've evolved from 2016 where not a lot was being done, both on the cybersecurity front, but also on the mis and disinformation front. To 2020, we're working with the major social media companies where that they ramped up staff. We're able to take things down, have things fact checked, and we got to a little bit of a better place to sort of tackle and deal with 2020. We have 2016 elections behind us. more resources are being dedicated to securing these campaigns, to elections, DHS, critical infrastructure. And, for my role, we sort of looked at it from the standpoint of who is securing these campaigns. The campaigns don't have the resources. I don't know a lot of CTOs and CISOs that are going to take an 18-month job pay cut to go work on a campaign. So we
And then
decided
in the last month, it's going to be a choice between you being on TV or you getting paid as
Yeah.
a CIO, and they're going to cut you. So
It's-
that's what a
it's-
campaign manager would do, right?
and there's no stock options, there's no employee purchase plans, there's no great benefits, other than sort of obviously believing in what you believe in, and hopefully sort of the candidates that you would put in place the policies that things that you believe in. So we wrapped our arms around all of our candidates and basically helped them to tackle their cybersecurity infrastructure. We did information security trainings for them. We extended our tools to help sort of get us insight and visibility into what's going on, right? So that's the fear, right? Is, an 18-month campaign with not a lot of resources, with staff coming in. How do you secure that? So how do you educate those people? Like, talk about not just sort of budgetary dollars, but attention dollars, right? Like how much time, you have to really get these staff as they come in the front door and take them from somebody who knows nothing about cybersecurity to now you're being targeted, your name's on a whiteboard in a nation state. Sorry, not a fair fight. But and it's the sort of situation where as a campaign, as a national party committee, we have to be right 100% of the time. The nation state has to be right once.
Yeah, you're talking like a Homeland Security expert. I mean, that's exactly, we had these conversations on the Hill with DHS officials. We have to be, get it right every time. And so you had to take that mentality to the campaigns. And do they adopt that mentality?
They do, and then part of this, I think, why we've been successful is we've not only we've partnered with them, and we offer something they don't have, right? Like they're not going to hire cybersecurity experts, so why not lean on us in the National Party Committee there? But sort of what we were able to do is the staff's hiring cycle is very not. It's linear as it grows, but it's how do you get all these people as they come in the door? So we have a monthly cybersecurity awareness training, and it basically paints the picture like, welcome. There's probably a press release that you were hired, or your name's now on an FEC report. So it's not hard for the people who want to target you to find you, right? You probably put it on LinkedIn. Bad guys are targeting and monitoring LinkedIn, FEC reports. So we sort of paint the picture for them like, great, you now work in a campaign. Here are all the things you need to do to up your cybersecurity. There's great groups like Defending Digital Democracy, Defending Digital Campaigns that's done stuff. USC, going around and doing educating people on the state level, and that all sort of helps to move the ball forward. Having now done this, these trainings prior to 2016 through, I get some of these people coming through, and this is their second and third time. So, we have a question and answer session and almost office hours afterwards, so people can stay on and be like, "Hey, how do I do this? I had this sort of thing happen," and we give out our contact information to them so that they can reach out to us. So, the biggest thing is like anywhere else, when something happens, when you see something, you have to say something, right? Like that's when the bad thing sort of happened, where you clicked on something, you opened something, you entered your information, and then nothing happened, and you sort of shrug your shoulders and like, "Oh, that's weird," when you go about your business. And sort of what I sort of do is paint it in analogies, like, if that bad thing happened, if somebody broke into your house and was living in your basement, do you want to kick them out today or 6 months from today? 6 months from today, they're not leaving so easily. Right? They might have befriended your dog. They have alternative ways into the house. We want to get them out day one. So that's what we want you to reach out to us. We can help you with that. So, I think that has been helpful to sort of at least paint the picture of where they now are and the workspace that they're in, and they have a partner to sort of to get to the better side, right?
I had an instance on one evening. I looked and I got an email from somebody that said, we know what you've been doing. We have pictures, and give us this or that. And I thought, oh God, what did I do? And then he goes to your catalog. And then I had the same thing with my boss, the Secretary of State and Deputy Secretary of State had both, been subject to this. And we went to our IT guy right away. And some people are too embarrassed to, because they're like, oh, maybe I did do something. And I don't know if I didn't know.
Excuse me, how much did they ask for?
You'd have to convert to Bitcoin. It depends on the day. It depends on the day. They're not taking cash.
But I called my boss and had an awkward thing. I'm like, I just got this thing because I thought maybe it was just me. You have to talk, you have to share about these things.
And part of what we're doing in the training is we're explaining scenarios where, like, listen, this is how this happens. You go on a vacation with a friend, colleague, whatever, you post it on social media. They've been monitoring you on social media because you saw that they saw that you put on LinkedIn that you now work for, this candidate or campaign. Well, they'll do a little research. They'll figure out your friend or colleague's, mobile phone number, and then they'll send you a text message that looks like it's from your friend, except it's not. It's been spoofed. And it's going to say, hey, here's the pictures I took on vacation. Well, who doesn't want to see the pictures that your friend took of you and your friend on vacation? So you click on it. And then, of course, what's the first thing it wants to do? It wants you to log in. You got to log in to see the pictures. Well, when you log into that site, you're not actually logging into that site. You're handing over your login, your password to the bad guys. So I think by us explaining beforehand who the bad guys are, how they're going to target you, and some examples of real attacks, it makes our users, our campaign staff, better prepared for when it actually does happen. That A, they know who to call, and B, they're not surprised by it.
Are the campaigns that you work with sensitized to generative AI, deep fake type imagery that may be coming out?
No, and so that's sort of the hard part of the world we live in right now, where they don't have that expertise. They will be some of the first ones to see it. The social media monitoring staff, the digital staff, they'll see it, but then it's like, okay, great, this is happening. What do we do, right? Because there's the whole thought of, okay, well, do you fight back and amplify it? Do you ignore it and not, but there are companies that we're working with now that can at least sort of quantify this to a degree to say, okay, this is how many people have seen it. This is how many botnets have reshared it, so you can make an educated decision, because, it is really the situation where just because a tree falls in the forest, that doesn't mean everybody's heard it. That doesn't mean you should combat it. So when we work with these companies, it helps to prepare these candidates, these staff, to say, because it's also, again, sort of time dollars. Like, if a staffer spends, 3 days trying to figure out how the response to this is, and 500 people in Texas saw it, and the races in North Carolina, they might not care as much. So I think we don't have all the proper things in place to eliminate it. We can put things in place to make better judgments as we go, to make smart decisions about how we spend our resources. But a lot of it's sort of in a post-2020 world where the social media companies have stepped back. It's been with organizations and research partners that are actually sort of seeing some of this, and some of the big providers, Microsoft, Google, that they're able to track this on a bigger, larger scale. And coming to the attention of the Department of Justice, they're able to sort of do bigger takedowns of this sort of stuff. And it really is a house of cards. Once it sort of crumbles, it takes a lot longer to pivot and rebuild it. When a candidate changes on the ballot, that takes a lot of effort when they have literally designed all their cycles to go after one person, one thing, and that changes. That's very hard. They're not very nimble in pivoting even with AI. We've seen where, in some of these places where they have to create so much content a day that the initial content is of better quality than at the end of the day when they have to hit their, I have to create 400 pieces of content today against this candidate. Well, the last 200 wasn't of the same quality, and we have groups that are tracking this sort of stuff now. So they are using AI, the bad guys, to craft better phishing emails, and we've seen that with the language in there is better English than it was prior. But there's still a miss between sort of the bad guys using AI to target. I mean, obviously they can create deepfakes, and there's groups that are looking at deepfakes, and as soon as it gets a lot of attention, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. People have seen it, but it's being targeted by experts quickly to be addressed faster than it was in 2022 and 2020 and 2016 for sure.
Well, very good. Thanks a lot. We're going to get back with more questions from our audience and maybe from me too, but appreciate your view. And if I could go now to an election official on the front lines. Well, I say he's an election official. He's the Chief Information Officer for Tarrant County. And let me tell you that every election official depends on the CIO in their respective municipality or county. André Mendes is CIO of Tarrant County, which is Fort Worth, Texas, if I'm not mistaken. He's responsible for the entire IT ecosystem, including the criminal justice system, law enforcement, and first responders in the county. And Tarrant County is bigger than my home state of Connecticut, I think. So this is a very serious job. Before returning home to Texas this year, André was the Chief Information Officer and Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer for the U.S. Department of Commerce. You can find his bio. I think something also of great interest to me, André, is that you've been in the nonprofit sector at global responsibilities. And so you're working at the local, state, and global level. You've seen a lot. You're probably seeing a lot now, but over to you. Very interested in hearing what you've got to say, and happy to have you here.
Sure. And thank you for inviting me. And first of all, a disclaimer: my comments are my thoughts, not those of Tarrant County. So I am fully responsible and the only one accountable for them. So very interesting couple of presentations, and of course, all of these issues are affecting or potentially affecting the elections in Tarrant County. We have put out a substantial effort from the operational side of the equation in terms of ensuring the integrity of the elections themselves. And so from making sure that the people that are able to cast a vote are indeed the people that should be able to cast a vote, and, is quite an intricate process. But that until having to do it myself, I really failed to understand the overall complexity. By virtue of a lot of efforts associated with making sure that the voting rolls are clean, that people that are improperly registered are removed from the votes. And that happens both by accident and also, as much as I hate to say it, by maliciousness. So we are working very diligently with a variety of tools, including cross-referencing tools internally from our IT systems and other IT systems across the state. Using artificial intelligence at some of the metadata and some of the information to ensure that the voting registration is reliable. A tough question. The other item where I think we are doing exercising extremely good is in the cybersecurity. Everything that you heard over the past 10 minutes is absolutely and positively real in the front lines out there. And so we've gone through extraordinary efforts in terms of ensuring that none of our systems are at the very least easily accessible, because we'll only have to break in once, but we have to protect the hundreds. But to tell you the truth, that is something that permeates just about every system I've ever worked over my 41-year career. Right? I mean, at the Department of Commerce, we were dealing with the census, and I can tell you that we were under withering attack during the decennium from a variety of complicating it, or at the very least disrupting the process. So, this has always been a very good. It is becoming more difficult because the system and so we have to make sure that all the systems and all of the other kind of systems are very clearly established. And that authorities and ability to access systems is very, very tightly controlled. I think by and large, knock on wood, I think that we have been able to accomplish that. And we've also engaged in a couple of exercises that were designed to build confidence in ourselves. We actually invite the public to come to our meetings and actually try to break into our systems. So in order to put them through the entire voting process, to make sure that they understood exactly how the votes were processed locally, how votes that are remote are processed, so that everybody could put the entire protocol through its paces and then report on us as appropriate to make sure that we could build. So it has been a very interesting discovery. At this point, I would like to think that we are fairly well equipped to conduct elections, in this coming cycle. That will both be very secure in terms of who is allowed to vote, the people who are supposed to be allowed to vote, also in the processing of those votes. And without a doubt, no, that too is, a concern, especially but it is something that actually you might not be familiar with this, but in Europe, several very large countries, France, the Netherlands, have totally and completely done away with voting by machines and are using paper ballots.
Thank you, André. I appreciate that. A couple things. One, I'd like to get to some questions for you and our other panelists. And two, if it's possible for you to speak up a little bit, because we're having some challenges with the sound quality. I want to make sure we get everything that you say. And Maggie Toulouse-Oliver, who is our third panelist, I think is not able to be on right now. Is that right? Because
she's in a court.
right, she's with the in front of the New Mexico Supreme Court, I think, talking about some election case. So she gets a pass for now, but she may join us a little bit later for questions and answers. But question for you, André, and also for Jude. What worries you the most with the emergence of AI in terms of our election process? And how do you think we might mitigate that threat?
So a lot of the issues that Mr. Luceri brought up, of course, are very worrisome in terms of the impact that they can have on the electorate at large from a formation of opinions, right? And the ability to scale relatively easily to influence a large number of people. But I tend to be always, or at least I try to be very realistic. The reality is that misinformation has been part of the equation when the media were different media, when robocalls were part of the equation, right? Both informational and malicious. When we have the candidates that go on live television on a debate in front of 40, 50 million people, and they lie outwardly, right? I mean, it's like, how much better can you get at misinformation than that, right? And so it's at the same time something that is new and potentially very, very damaging from a scalability standpoint, but something that has always been part of the equation, and that we have to hopefully rely on a public that is a little more discriminate in terms of the information that it consumes, with the understanding that that's not always going to be the case. But this is a long-standing proposition, having grown up in Europe under regimes of all kinds, including fascist, socialist, and communist. I can tell you that that was part of the equation from the get-go with every single one of our equations when they were around. And so I think that the part that worries me the most is really the fast potentiation by virtue of all artificial intelligence platforms, and the enormous reach that social media. But misinformation is a long-standing phenomenon.
Thank you. That gives us and you're right, it's part of the historic sweep of information operations out there. But now with the AI, it's kind of on hyper speed, and the reach is magnified beyond anything that we used to see before. Jude, what worries you the most with AI and its emergence, the potential in bad actor hands?
I just a couple of things there. One is, and then actually just sort of going back to Luca's slide of sort of how it propagates. One of the things that sort of has changed, and obviously, yes, we've had robocalls, but obviously, the ability for, someone in a foreign land to do that was more difficult when we're talking about robots. The reach, was longer. We had records to track some of this stuff sort of better. The thing that sort of gets me now in Luca's slide, though, was, part of the amplification now, we have actual political candidates amplifying. We have sitting members of House, Senate that are actually amplifying. So it makes the jump to mainstream media a lot quicker now, because it's not, like John Doe who's amplifying this. This is sitting senator who is now read somewhere on some site with some inauthentic content and is now promoting it on their, social media. So that makes the jump quicker and faster. And that's the piece that sort of, in 2016 that might have been missing that is there now for misinformation, disinformation, AI being more successful. You're absolutely right that it sort of shortens the cycle to get content out faster, right? What troubles me, or what sort of is my fear is organizations don't really have their hands around, campaigns don't really to the extent have their hands around who in a campaign, what vendors are using it, what guardrails are there, what guidelines are there, to an extent are these closed AI systems, meaning, obviously whatever you pump into it is retained in that container, or is this open where, if you're looking to do some data modeling, you got some voter file information, all of a sudden you got a young staffer who's like, no, AI is great. I get to pump all this information and it does some great things for me. Well, now that information can't be pulled out of there. You have a whole state's, voter file of information and, just way too much information about a person that is now fully accessible to everyone who has access to that AI model. So I don't think there's enough education policy and guardrails for those. I mean, it's sort of the, there's always an acceptable use, like check here to use this product sort of, and we all just sort of blow past it and click yes. Well, what people aren't realizing that are using them is this, okay, well, am I just asking questions out or am I putting things in? And once you put that stuff in there, it's there for everyone, to use maliciously or otherwise. That's what fears me the most is people they want to use it. It's the new, sort of buzzword toy thing, but they don't know the ramifications of the tool that they're sort of wielding.
Adam, I think you had something.
Yes, we're starting to get questions from those who joined us online. And there's some very senior election people, I think, whose names you might recognize. This one's from Mike Schneider, member of the Public Diplomacy Council, and with the Syracuse and the CSIS. Can one adversary somehow gain entry into the computer system of any state and affect the outcome? Or alternatively, are there scenarios for one side faking a contested election in instances of a very close vote requiring a recount, and then using a combination of bots and memes to intensify and broaden public criticism of the vote? Two different scenarios.
Geez, I would say sure. I mean, absolutely. And especially with Luca's model that you saw with the bot kind of network out there that can amplify and inflame. If you consider Georgia, which is changing its rules, State Board of Elections, its recent actions mean that the count is going to be delayed. And think of the amount of time and attention, let's say it comes down to Georgia. And then if you have generative AI putting out false images, amplifying that misinformation in a sensitive time, that's a nightmare scenario that I hope doesn't happen.
I agree with that 100%. The only thing I'll sort of say with respect to hacking into or getting into a system, the genius of our elections is how separated it is across the country, right? There's no one thing you break into to change an election. And if you want to sway an election as a hacker, nation state, advocate, you have to break into multiple systems across multiple states. And here's the thing, if there's 15,000 voters and you tweak the vote to 25,000, that sets off alerts. It isn't as easy as like movies and a lot of the discourse online. I'm no elections expert, but this is part of the genius of community level, precinct level voting, right? It's like if a precinct has 350 people, there can't be 20,000 votes that come out of there. there can't be more votes than there are precinct members. So there are some checks and balances there. You know, there are things like it is voted 60% this way, 35% this way. Historically, if all of a sudden it's 95-5, all of a sudden we can in some places we can hand count votes. We can check these sorts of things. So there's some checks and balances that make it a little harder to do that. It's much easier just to use AI and spread disinformation to get people to not vote or to vote based on.
Actually, that your last scenario happened once where they discovered, wait a minute, this makes no sense. And they went back and accounted it. I think it was an historically Republican district, which suddenly was 95-5 Democratic. This can't be. So you just a common sense thing, something's wrong, and then you go back and count it.
Well, and you know, DHS sees something. There are groups now that are working with that have DoD level of expertise that are working with these state parties and working with election officials such that they're able to better tell when someone's knocking on the door than they were prior to 2016.
And I would just add a PS, which is you've been wonderful working with us, André and others. We've worked with all 50 Republican state parties and 49 of the 50 Democratic parties. We don't know why North Carolina dropped out, for whatever reason. We also worked with people who run presidential campaigns and state and local campaigns across the country. And Bob Schrum, who ran Kerry's campaign in 2004, and Mike Murphy were in one meeting that we had. Mike ran Jude in 2016 and a lot of other Republican campaigns. And Schrum said, if I were running a campaign today, I would shut it down for an hour and say, everybody has to take this cybersecurity thing, or you don't get your email back. Is that a solution?
I mean, that's why we do it on the front side, right? Like before we even give you a login and a password, you have to go through the cybersecurity training. We, we provide staff with hardware security keys. So it isn't that that isn't the obstacle, right? Like we show you how to set it up day one, right? So we try again. The problem is there is the work account, there's the personal account. The user has to protect the personal account. We'll help them with that. But unfortunately, nation state actors don't care where they target, right? They'll go after the personal account. It largely will be reported in the press that, this campaign was compromised. Well, that could have been somebody's personal account that didn't have as good a security. But we tell them there's a difference between the work and a personal. Don't forward your email over to your personal account, right? Don't increase your exposure. And there are things now, there's, encrypted messaging. There's a lot of things that we're using now that didn't exist in 2016. So it's more of a what you say on what channel matters, right? If I'm texting my wife that I'm on my way home, who cares? Anybody in the world can read that. If I'm talking about a cybersecurity incident for a particular campaign, that's not going to happen across email because anybody else who's listening across that airwave or that wire can see it. Anybody whose computer is compromised has that email. And if they keep that email for 10 years from now, that person gets popped and now it's all over the press. So you can do it across encrypted and ephemeral messaging applications now. So that sort of stuff doesn't stay around forever. And that's it. It's a way to limit sort of your exposure that we're informing these campaigns and elections and people in and around elections to use these sorts of things to decide what you say where. Like you wouldn't say in a room full of people, including your opponents, something that could negatively affect your campaign. Maybe you don't say it across email. Maybe you choose a different vector for that.
And I think, André, please.
If I may, so I mean, it is generally known, right, that 85% of all cyber breaches originate with a phishing email, right? And so that's part of the equation. So that education campaign is not only extremely important, but it must be taking place on a constant basis. And with the interpretation things, how incredibly sophisticated the phishing expeditions become. Especially now with AI and the ability to do deepfakes for both audio and video and everything else in between. But there is another thing that we all need to be very cognizant of. And it deals with the limitation of information that talked about. And let me give you an example that is very real to me and that gets into a completely different realm. About a year and a half ago, by virtue some Microsoft technology, specifically substrates for Office 365. The Chinese government was able to actually impersonate several high-level officials of the Bible, despite the fact that they did nothing wrong and all of the systems were completely protected. And it's important that people understand that even under the best of circumstances, there are still potential inherent system flaws that will expose your information, which then means, that the amount of information that you share in this type of channels has to be absolutely and completely limited, because there is no safe haven, guaranteed safe haven. My email was compromised not only at the Department of Commerce for my official account, but also for my personal account on Hotmail using the same substrate. And this used to be classified, it no longer is, but the Secretary of State, the ambassador to China was compromised, and so was the Secretary of Commerce. And so it is important that everybody realizes that when it comes to this type of information, there is no 100% guarantees, regardless of who you are, regardless of the amount of money that you have to secure your environment, and all of the due diligence that you can bring to the table. SolarWinds was a perfect case of that, and this Microsoft Office 365 is a perfect example of that. And so that's, must serve as a reminder to everybody who's involved with sensitive information that there are people who share it, and that email, by and large, even some of the most secure ones, is not the best.
Thank you, André. And Adam, I think we're at the point in our program where we take questions from everybody here and everybody online.
I have a question.
Sylvia, go ahead.
Yeah. It follows up with what Mr. Mendes was saying in terms of less is more. So practically no channel is 100% safe, right? So he's nodding. But you still have to communicate with each other. So what would you recommend, or what do you say would be the safest?
So my colleagues mentioned some of the encrypted platforms, right? And so, yes, those offer you some degree of protection. But the reality is that, some people out there, very decent people, are also looking for protection from government, right? And so there are encrypted platforms that do some degree of that. But even what is probably considered one of the safest ones now, Telegram, is talking about sharing some information with entities. And so the encrypted platforms is definitely where it's at. But again, with understanding that there's no 100% guarantee of being in a scope. And there, maybe you're getting into the 5 nines and 6 nines, if you know, 99.995 or 99.999. But even then, there's compromises that take place in security wireless. So we just need to be very, very cautious with what we talk about and the platforms in which we talk about them. But that is something that we have to live with. That is a reality that we have to live with in an environment where systems are ubiquitous, systems are necessary, systems are essential for the conducting and preservation of civilization. And as there's inherent dangers associated with it. That's doomsday, but it is what it is.
I have to go to someone who I used to work with, Evan Zwick, whose name is known to a lot of you, legend in his own time, head of the voter news service. He had the question, are election day and election night especially vulnerable times for AI attacks? And how do you deal with those critical times? We had that in 2020 with the attack on the Associated Press election night. So your thoughts?
I can say as an election official, I used to get into the office before the polls opened, and not a lot of sleep the night before. So these are people, and from the poll workers to the counters to the county officials, it's everybody's at their wit's end. So that's just something to bear in mind. So yes, it's a particularly vulnerable time for people to see imagery or whatever it may be, and maybe even believe it or jump at it. So that's something, I think that's a great point. And I think we're all going to have to be patient a couple days after the election. And for election officials, we're all going to have to. I had a little keep calm and carry on sign at my desk, and that's what we had to do all the time.
Whistling past the gravy.
Yeah.
I would also just add that behind the scenes, that what people don't see is the coordination of local officials, federal officials. Part of election being part of the national infrastructure now means DHS, CISA are working with the campaigns and are working with local. So when something is happening, there is a higher level of coordination, and they are a lot quicker now to get information out that is either statewide or locally, depending on the election, to educate the masses that, if there's imagery that, hey, don't show up to your polling place today because X, Y, or Z could happen. They're trying to knock that down faster if it does come in the last sort of 24 hours.
And the president of the Associated Press, Gary Pruitt, said the only way they stayed up on election night 2020 was because Homeland Security came in and helped them defend against. But he said there were thousands of attacks that night from Russia.
They have been great partners.
George Pendleton.
Adam's son has been very helpful in sharing with me a paradigm they operate within the Marine Corps called assault into ambush. So I remember when you mentioned that you came home on the night, Scott, and the president's assassination attempt was on. I got a simultaneous LinkedIn a few days later that had a picture of Secret Service agents smiling as if they were enjoying the moment. Now, I'm just going from the peanut gallery here, but in high school, one of my high school classmates wrote in my yearbook, believe nothing that you hear, half of what you see, and all of what you feel. And that's how I'm wired. So I'm not wired to open up links. If someone sent me pictures of them on a summer vacation or vacation, and they've never done that before, I might call them and in advance to say, did you send it? Because I'm expecting already that someone's going to try to manipulate me. All that to say, my biggest threat, and my biggest concern about the threat is when Jack Welch said, when change on the outside is coming faster than change on the inside, the end is in sight. So what I'm curious to know is, are the manipulators on the outside in the private sector on these networks, are they bringing about change and attacks faster than a federal government that took 50 years to rewrite a telco law from 1934 to 1996? And I don't know if there's been one that succeeded, but can government keep up? And the last construct I want to put in this, because it's a lot to think here. If you could imagine during the 40-day reign, when people were looking at the imperative of where to seek higher ground, and there were arguments as to where to go seek higher ground. How narrow was that window where folks said, we have to think about a different existence because there isn't going to be any higher ground. What is that higher ground where this blood is coming in now? What is AI going to do that's going to require us to exist on a different landscape? Because I sense both sides are just looking for this solution in a race that may not be able to be won. But I think what do we do about this? And maybe you don't do anything about it, but you assault into ambush as your best defense. And that's a long way about, but maybe one of the two of you could tackle that.
Boy, brilliant insights. I'll give you a top of the mind to your point about in 2020 election, the coordination that we had with state, local, federal officials was really great, and with the companies, the social media firms. So cooperation, communication amongst the good guys is essential. I would say we're just that much behind the malefactors, but reacting, orient, act, react. So we're not too far behind, but guess what? My information's a bit dated because that was 2 years ago. That's how fast it's moving right now. In terms of, it's a great question for André or anybody here. Can we as human beings, how do we process information? That's what you were getting at. And I'm optimistic long-term, because this generation of my son's 17, they are used to understanding that what they can't buy everything they see on the internet. They can't take it all as truth. Maybe it's us older ones that are, looking at it as authoritative. So I'm optimistic long-term, but cooperation amongst private sector, government, all of us is going to be essential.
Matt, welcome.
So it seems to me that a common
Matt, can you
theme,
come to the table just so we can get your audio a little easily? And then I see John Pavlik with his hand up, so John, you're next.
yeah, so it seems to me that a common theme that is popping up here is obviously the volume of disinformation, and AI is part of this. And maybe this question that's aimed mostly towards Luca, but it seems to me that there is no solution on this that can depend on individual ability to discern or to not click that link. It's always going to happen. There's no way to defeat it. So to what degree can we better utilize AI as part of the solution to defeat the threat that AI poses? We know that there's issues about how do you use AI to detect AI, but Luca, maybe if you can provide any more information that's possibly a little more technical, what is needed, what's in process, what are the opportunities to make that a reality?
Yeah, I can briefly say that we are using AI to defeat AI and the malicious application of AI. The most straightforward thing that we noticed when analyzing this data from the current election, related to the current election, is that signals like amplification, like these coordinated networks, are quite easy to spot. And this is something we have been working on with our group for the last 10 years or so. So inauthentic behaviors, bots, trolls, and this kind of coordination is quite easy to identify. When it comes to generated AI content or content generated by AI, it's way more difficult because I will say for a simple reason. It's because everything is quite new and is progressing at a very fast pace. So we probably we are using our detection tool for coordination detection as a way to then examine and explore content shared by these inauthentic networks and see if we can identify AI generated content or any form of misinformation or information. So instead of using the whole information from a given social media network, we then restrict our analysis to suspicious users detected by the coordination detection model that we have, and then we analyze these messages. But still, it's very complicated to, and it's still, we are still behind when it comes to detecting generated AI content nowadays. It's very challenging. So as of today, I think the best shot that we have is to look at signals like coordination and inauthentic amplification.
If I can just follow up real quick. I mean, do you think there's, rather than looking at from specifically the AI perspective, AI doing the detection, do you think we have to have really serious conversations with the tech companies about actually creating new standards for file formats, sort of internal meta tagging, that sort of thing, so that authentic images are generated in a certain way that an AI system, in theory, could not produce?
Well, it depends on how open these platforms, and in particular the owners and management of these platforms, are to collaborate with the government and other related offices. This is a question that I had before, the previous interview about that. So I'm not sure, and I want to ask, what's the extent of collaboration we have between the government and the and private companies? Because that's the main part of the game. I think that's where we probably need to understand if there are. I think Scott was talking about that. He mentioned that there's something, but we are still behind, right? That's
Yeah,
what he's-
right. In the 2020 cycle, in 2022, Department of Homeland Security has a system where they have ongoing conversation with the social media companies and with election officials. And so that worked, I thought, quite well. But as you said, some of the social media firms have backed up a bit on knocking down content, but it was pretty good where we would spot something that was patently wrong about the election system itself, not about candidates or any of that stuff, but just about how to vote, how to register, where to vote. And if we raised that, that would get dealt with. We were actually looking at the dark web as well, because we were trying to get way deep before it percolated up, and we could knock it down then.
There's been some efforts by Microsoft and others where campaigns can upload all of their ads and content to a repository such that it can be digitally checked back, so that if something has been altered, you can tell a little bit. I forget getting buy-in from all candidates across 50 states and all these elections, and that spending the resources and time to also upload to this repository. I don't know that it 100% took off the ground, but there are efforts to sort of stop some of this from happening before it even takes off.
And as of today, there's certain that we are witnessing some friction or the reluctance of social media platforms to even open their platform for researchers. The most important case is the Twitter API that has been shut down, and it was one of the main resource for us to study Twitter. So there's some friction there, and we can see that some platforms are reluctant in opening their system for researchers and sharing with researchers data. So to quickly answer your question, yes, we can use these models that we designed to identify this amplification or this inauthentic coordination, and potentially provide some inputs to the government and the social media platforms. It's then up to them to enact some interventions or some moderation strategies. So
one of the major challenges that I think we're going to be facing in the future is the enormous increase in computational and networking ability that is being brought to the table, not only for the high-end players in terms of supercomputers, but also to a much lower entry level of individuals, especially rogue operators, that can buy massive amounts of on-demand computational ability and bandwidth and distribution capability in terms of software as a service, computers as a service, networking as a service, hacking as a service, and so on and so forth, that will create a very serious issue. At the same time, on the other side of the equation, in terms of the security, you are all probably familiar or at least heard about 256-bit encryption, right? Which allows you to have a modicum of security, and that it takes hackers a substantial amount to crack. All of a sudden, we introduce quantum computing, and post-quantum cryptography becomes one of our biggest challenges, because those algorithms that were so difficult to break with regular machines can now be broken in minutes by quantum computing. And so I think that this is going to continue to be a very, very serious challenge. And I'm not sure that there is a ready-made solution that will protect us against everything that I would point out, and that might be somewhat controversial, is that origins of information and misinformation are, depending on time, sometimes the same sources, right? What was disinformation 3 years ago might be information today. Because the reality is that information gets as a result, it produces a whole set of uncertainties, which is one of the reasons why we are facing some of these challenges. So effectively, what we have is a set of situations that are going to require some very careful thinking, but that nobody should be accepting any answers that they will be resolved. These are enormous challenges to humanity as we know it today. I mean, we could talk about humanity is no interfaces and human interfaces and all of that that might provide us with additional tools in order to determine what is real and what. But you know, let's make no mistake, this is only going to get more complicated and harder to deal with as we go forward. The computational capability out there and the incredibly low price at which you can purchase it is accelerating exponentially.
We have less than 10 minutes left. Let's see how many questions we can get in. John Pavlik, you've been patient, and we have one more online and one more here in the room. See how many we can get to.
Thank you. I'm just following up a bit on this, especially for Luca or the other panelists. What are your recommendations for, I'm a journalism professor at Rutgers, so I'm always interested in this side of things. What are your recommendations for journalists or news media as they try to make their coverage of, you know, the elections most effective in this time of, you know, potentially misinformation, deep fakes, and other things that would corrupt the political communication process?
And before you answer, John is being modest. He's also worked on artificial intelligence and augmented reality in previous projects.
Well, if I may, I will give an opportunistic answer to John, and it will be like to work in collaboration with computational scientists that can provide you with some findings or extract some insights based on the data that we observe and work with. Of course, one can say, yes, I can look at the data and I can do that by myself, but given the huge size of data we work with, it will be probably challenging or impossible for a human or even teams of humans to look at this data in a short time frame. So having the possibility to scale our analysis up and find insights in a fast way and extract findings in a very fast way can be a winning point when it comes to, I don't know, write an article or investigate a given topic related to the election.
Hey, Bruce Guthrie.
Hi. During the last presidential debate, CNN took some heat for fact-checking the former president. People who live in their silos don't actually want to hear the other side. They're used to getting reinforced. When you talk about correcting AI images and such, the silos are never going to see that correction, right? They're never going to see the statement from whatever office because their biased network isn't going to mention it. It's never going to admit they were wrong. How do you deal with inability for people to actually accept responsibility for the information they put out? Okay, that was a good answer. Thank you.
That's a good question, right?
How do you correct it if they don't want to hear?
And our research done in 2020, and Luca, you're probably seeing it again this year, is that the misinformation travels faster and farther than the correction. Consistent.
Especially if the networks they're on don't want to cover that information.
I think yeah, I think it's less of a correction and a winning the war sort of situation, and it's more knocking things down before they get too big. You know, it's literally mitigating them more than it is like, oh, fixing it. Because obviously, if you know, as these networks get taken down, which you know, DOJ's done some of that, which is great. That's great when those things come offline. But it's much harder to sort of quote unquote win the war against some of this stuff, and people would accept responsibility. The easiest thing is when it's been detected, seen, and taken down, that's the fastest sort of, nobody sticks around for whose fault with that. There are researchers that do that, and but there's just not enough from the platforms that they're being put on to prevent them from being seen. There's not, then it gets in a whole filtering and are we curbing speech? Well, if it's inauthentic, AI generated, I don't care if we're stopping AI from having free speech. So it kind of depends there who your audience is, but I think a larger role has to be taken from the platforms where they exist.
And people still believe that they eat pets in Springfield.
Back to the once it gets magnified by an elected official, it sticks around a lot longer than if it's a bot that we can knock down, or that a bot might be spreading it, but 1,000 people across the country see it. Okay, that's still terrible, but it's not the same level of once it gets repeated by a national figure and then picked up on mainstream media, then it's everywhere. And then that toothpaste doesn't go back to, nobody sticks around to see, oh, that was false, and then hold people accountable, right? Whereas the holding of accountability is kind of gone out the window.
You can't talk down Fox News.
That's exactly what we.
Just squeeze in one last question. Somebody who's been patient. Users are now being overloaded with content, and information is being condensed into short form content, tweets, TikTok videos, thus losing substance, nuance, and time to delivery. How do you factor this oversaturation with bits of data and your abilities in combating misinformation?
It makes it harder for sure, but it's been an opportunity for some candidates to get a message, even if brief, in front of an audience, right? That's also an opportunity for misinformation, just the same. But again, in my opinion, it still falls to the platforms that they end up on, who is governing these sorts of things. There used to be a day when there were news stories and corrections in the paper, and even if those were small and on back pages, they at least happen. There's not a whole lot of that on platforms where these sorts of things happen. So it's not a perfect world or a solution or situation, but it's been great for reaching some voters that have tuned out of mainstream media, right? We have candidates that definitely feel they have to be in those places, although they might not necessarily feel like it's the platform for them. But that's where a segment of the population is getting information or news. That's part of the deterioration of how news used to be propagated and how it currently is propagated.
And one last message from Santa Fe, New Mexico, where unfortunately Maggie Toulouse Oliver, the Secretary of State of New Mexico, is still in court, so not able to join us. But thank you to those who could join us, which includes, of course, here Scott Bays, Jude, Meche, and thank you for joining us in Chicago.
Sure.
The Democratic Convention, our program there. Luca in Los Angeles, André in Tarrant County, and everybody who joined us here in person and online. Thank you for being with us. We will return with another one of these sessions very soon. We'll notify you all. And until then, we're adjourned. Thank you.